This is a new day. This is a new day full of sound and light and expectation. This day has been waiting for you. This day has been waiting especially for you, to embrace you, to guide you. This day has been waiting with open arms just for you. This is the day we have been given. Let's not waste it. Come now and let us worship together. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Reverend Joseph Boyd, and I am so glad to welcome you on this beautiful Sunday morning in one of the best cities in the world, Youngstown, Ohio, here directly at 1105 Elm Street in a sanctuary that was built in 1925. For over a century, our church has committed ourselves to standing with the marginalized and helping us all grow on our own journey towards spiritual fulfillment and joy. We have humanists, theists, Jews, Buddhists, and we are so grateful to welcome you, all of you who are joining us live this morning and viewing us via Zoom, via Facebook, and all those who are going to view us later on YouTube. We would love to get to know you. So please say hello in the chat box, introduce yourself if you are new, and we would love to have a relationship and get to know you. So I wanted to let you all know that this is going to be the last Sunday I'm going to be in the pulpit until August 3rd is when I am back in town, and I'll be back in the pulpit August 8th. I'm going to be away for a bit of study leave and vacation. I'll be leaving the church tomorrow, and I'll be back on August 3rd. And in the meantime, I want to let you know that we have a wonderful selection of preachers, a variety of different preachers every single week. And I know you're going to appreciate and enjoy them. And so I look forward to hearing about your experience of them. I know it's going to be very good. I also want to mention that Jennifer Ruth Boyd is doing sound this morning while Tim Raridan is away for the week. So please send your gratitude and best wishes to Jennifer in the chat box. I know she would appreciate it very much. And this last weekend, as more and more people know, now probably more than ever, our nation celebrated Juneteenth. And also, this is Pride Month. And it just so happens to be on this day, Father's Day. And so I want to welcome all of you who have celebrated, especially Juneteenth, as a nation. And I'm looking forward to sharing in my message this morning how these three very central events in our life are related to each other. And there's a question down in the chat box for you to discover and talk about later in the breakout session about your relationship to meeting your Father and the choices we have and the ways that we choose to meet our fathers. And again, hopefully the message will provoke you to think more deeply about that, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. And I want to thank all of you who helped with the Strawberry Social yesterday on Saturday. We had a Strawberry Social here in Youngstown, Ohio. We had a few people who joined us virtually, and we had a good number who came in person. And thank you all who helped set up for the social, picking fresh strawberries from Columbiana County. Thank you for picking up ice cream and just being great hosts, which is in the DNA of our church. I so appreciated seeing you in person, and I'm looking forward to more events this summer where I'm going to get the opportunity to see you in person and virtually as well. And now I would like to welcome Marcus Carantane for our chalice lighting.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Marcus Carantang, and thank you for inviting me to your service today. I was invited to speak on my own experiences with Pride Month. Specifically, I wanted to talk on the intersectionality of being both African American and queer, and then respect to my own faith. In the African American community, as queer people kind of face oppression on both sides of the aisle. In the larger scheme of things, with white supremacy and all of that, we're oppressed in that way. But in our own community, Black queer people kind of rank lower on the totem pole. It's really just part of the culture where there is no safe space for Black queer people. Specifically within the churches, growing up in the Black church, a lot of us who are Black and queer are taught heavily with like guilt and shame, where it's wrong. And we learn that if we are Black and queer, it's an automatic ticket to damnation and hell. So learning how to navigate life with all of those pressures and being told so many like untruths about ourselves and learning to hate ourselves. And then as we get older, whether it be through therapy or like rediscovering our own faith in our relationship with the spirit and God, I'm kind of unlearning a lot of things. For me personally, it was a bit of a longer journey of unlearning all of the resentment that I had towards the church, but still trying to find and navigate my own way with my faith. For me personally, I did that by I'm sort of not going to church, but developing my own relationship with God, because I believe that you can have the church and the spirit is everywhere. It could be on this Zoom, on your drive to work, like on a rainy afternoon. Like the presence of God is all around us. And so learning that for myself and realizing that, you know, God made me this way. Like I have a purpose here to spread light and love to everyone and all of those around me, that I can do all of that while still being a queer person, and that it's okay. In the grander scheme of society, I believe in today's day and age, like the intersectionality of being both Black and queer is becoming more accepted, especially with Juneteenth being recognized, a sort of racial reckoning that all of us had last summer. We're starting to come to terms and realizing that we are okay as we are. That we don't have to change ourselves and to be more palatable for, you know, wider audiences, that we can come as we are, we can be as loud as we want, as creative as we want, and we will still be accepted by those around us. And I did want to read this specific chalice sighting that I found that kind of speaks to my own experience. So we light this chalice to welcome the spirit of light into our lives today and forevermore. May this light rekindle the faith, trust, hope, and love, which is the true image of the spirit of life, and we are made in the spirit's image. May this light remind us to give thanks to the one and only source of our lives. May this light remind us that we are skillfully crafted and we are the masterpiece of our Maker. The one who has great mystery on how to talk with the infants, deaf and blind, the one who speaks to the wind, when to move and when to stop. May this light carry our prayers to the spirit of life in giving glory and seeking forgiveness over our brokenness. With this chalice in a special way to ask for divine healing for the earth, may this flame be the symbol of our prayers, burning continually to the heavens as a sweet smelling aroma. As the flame continues burning and the wax melts away, let also our pain melt away. As this flame goes up and the wax melts away, let the spirit of our beloved ones who have transformed from this life go in peace and live in paradise. May this be our humble prayer. Amen. And with this, we light our chalice.
Thank you very much, Marcus. You're welcome, and we welcome you with the covenant of this church, which we recite now. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Each month, we give to an organization that supports transformation in our community, which is the heart of our mission. In our church's historic commitment to the well-being of our community, we give 100% of our non-designated money to those in need. Every June, UUYO joins many local organizations to celebrate LGBTQ plus Pride Month. June was designated LGBTQ plus Pride Month to remember, recognize, and honor the 1969 Stonewall Uprising. One of the Mahoning Valley's active LGBTQ plus organizations is no stranger to UUYO, Full Spectrum Community Outreach Center. Full Spectrum was created in 2016 to provide mental health services, support groups, community education, and eventually housing for the LGBTQIA plus community. Their mission is to build an inclusive Mahoning Valley where LGBTQIA people thrive as healthy, equal, and complete members of society. Building relationships with area businesses and social services organizations became a priority to raise awareness of the LGBTQIA plus population. Full Spectrum created an LGBTQ plus friendly business guide and has participated in many community dialogues about diversity, equality, and inclusion. In 2019, Full Spectrum launched their first annual Pride Festival, Pride in the Valley, which continues to be held in Warren, Ohio. This year, Full Spectrum is working on a very ambitious and exciting project, purchasing and opening the area's first LGBTQIA plus shelter. Currently, there are no shelters that are safe, welcoming places for the LGBTQ plus individuals in the greater Mahoning Valley. Full Spectrum hopes to be able to change that. So far, Full Spectrum has raised sufficient funds from generous local donors. The project is on its way, but our support can help make sure this project moves forward from an idea to a reality. We will now receive the offering that supports the life of Youngstown, the Mahoning Valley, and the wider world.
And please join me for a few moments of meditation. I know some of you might be sitting at home or in your car. If that's the case, you can just raise your spine just a little bit, but not too tense, just to open up your body a little bit. If you're lying down, or if you're walking, running, or multitasking right now, that's all okay. Just notice the breath in your body as you're doing what you're doing and as your body is in the position that it's in. And let us feel the breath that is animating all of us right now in this moment, across the world, throughout space and time.
Our reading is excerpts from Another Bullshit Night in Suck City, a memoir by Nick Flynn. My father may not hear voices, but he also has an impossible project. He's also filled with a force larger than himself. In nearly every letter that my father has sent me for the last 25 years, he tells me that his writing is going very, very well. His novel, such as it is, if it is at all, written in blackout and prison, is his arc, the thing that will save him, that will save the world. His single-mindedness impresses most, his fathomless belief in his own greatness, in his power to transform a failed world, to make it whole again by a word, by a story. That if you stick with your vision long enough, you will be redeemed. All of this in the face of his life, of near constant evidence to the contrary. The actual circumstances of his life, his alcoholism, the crimes he's committed, his homelessness, and decades of poverty, these are mere tests. And what is faith with not tested? Noah needed to gather nails, to sort out the animals, to convince his sons. He planed this timber and laid out the ribs. His ark would be bigger than the temple. We all need to create the story that will make sense of our lives, to make sense of the daily tasks. Yet each night, the doubts returned, howling through him. Without doubt, there can be no faith. At daybreak, Noah looked at the darkening sky and vowed to work faster. My father cannot die, he tells me, will not until his work is completed. But is there a deadline inside him for when he must finish? A day like Noah when the rains begin? When the boat, finished or not, begins to rise from the cradle?
only child, alone and wild, a cabinet maker's son. His hands were meant for different work, and his heart was known to none. He left his home and went his lone and solitary way, and he gave to me a gift I know I never can repay. A quiet man of music, denied a simpler fate. He tried to be a soldier once, but his music wouldn't wait. He earned his love through discipline, a thundering velvet hand. His gentle means of sculpting souls took me years to understand. The leader of the band is tired and his eyes are growing old, but his blood runs through my instrument and his song is in my soul. My life has been a poor attempt to imitate the man. I'm just a living legacy to the leader of the band. My brothers' lives were different, for they heard another call. One went to Chicago and the other to St. Paul. And I'm in Colorado when I'm not in some hotel, living out this life I've chose and come to know so well. Thank you for the music and your stories of the road. I thank you for the freedom when it came my time to go. I thank you for the kindness and the times when you got tough. And Papa, I don't think I said I love you near enough. The leader of the band is tired and his eyes are growing old, but his blood runs through my instrument and his song is in my soul. My life has been a poor attempt to imitate the man. I'm just a living legacy to the leader of the band. I am a living legacy to the leader of the band.
Nick Flynn wrote a memoir about his father, who was always in some kind of trouble, living all over the country where his mother could never find him, spending time in prison. And it's a memoir about all the ways that his father influenced his life, even in absence. His father was a writer who one day said he was guaranteed to write the next great American novel. And when he did write to his son, Nick, he assured him that publishing success was imminent. Years later, Nick Flynn himself would become a writer, quite well respected and published But before Nick reached that point in his life, he worked at a homeless shelter in Boston. And his main job at the homeless shelter was to do intake, to be a person at the front desk who would welcome people who came in from the streets of Boston who needed shelter. And one day, while he was working the front desk at this homeless shelter, his father walked in the door and asked for a bed after not seeing him for decades. Out of that meeting, that simple meeting face to face, came a transformation for Nick. And it began a relationship, understanding the ways that he was like his father, the ways he hoped he wouldn't be like his father, and the long, mature journey of learning to accept your father as a fellow human being, no more and no less. His father actually helped him to stop drinking. He struggled in ways that were very similar to his father, and seeing the toll that alcoholism took on his father actually helped him to turn his own life around, to make different choices. That is something I've come to respect over the last few years. Sometimes people come into your life and inspire you because they embody something that you wish to embody, something that is attractive, something that is life-giving. But some people come into your life and inspire us by showing us how we don't want to be. It's actually an equally powerful teaching, one that more and more I've grown to deeply respect as actually almost equal with someone who inspires us through goodness. Some people teach us how we don't want to be and where we don't want to end up. And that can actually inspire us in a very powerful way to make positive life choices, or at least want to make those positive life choices. Nick writes very openly about his father's foibles and about his own as well. Nick's father is a chronic liar with delusions of grandeur, lying about what he has accomplished or where he's been or who knows him. One of the stories that his father tells Nick is that his grandfather invented the life preserver, the vests that allow you to float in the water so you don't drown in case you get knocked out of a ship or in case you can't swim. And Nick assumes, like most of these stories, that this is complete BS. This story is definitely probably not true. And Nick discovers through writing his memoir and doing research for it that this actual piece of information, this story, actually is the truth. And he finds his grandfather's patent for the life preserver. I read this memoir over 15 years ago, and I've always remembered it. I remember it because what I personally got from this memoir was that the most important thing a father can give you is something left undone. The most important thing a father can give you is something left undone. The greatest thing a father can give you is something that you have left to do in your own lifetime. That's something left undone by a father, by a parent. It could be a way of being, a project, or ambition. It's a great gift when a father leaves you something undone. Sometimes that's a hard gift to accept, a hard gift to grapple with. but a valuable one if we know how to receive it. Eventually, Nick Flynn's memoir was made into a Hollywood movie called Being Flynn. And in the film, Robert De Niro plays his father, and Paul Dano, the actor, plays himself in his 20s working at this homeless shelter. And Nick would often come to set and watch them film scenes that he wrote down from his life. And one of those scenes is the first time that his father, played by Robert De Niro, comes into the shelter, and Paul Dano, the son, sees him for the first time after decades. Well, they filmed this scene about 15 times, 15 different takes. And that experience changed Nick's life. He said later, he wished the entire film would have been just takes, an hour and a half of different ways that a child could meet their father. That would be a great film. All the different ways and nuances, all the different emotions, all the different subtext, everything, all the different ways we possibly could meet our Father. It's endless, actually, the ways that we can meet our Father. You know, we can meet our Father with gratitude. We can meet our Father with respect. We can meet our Father with compassion for what they've lived through and what they've struggled with. We can also meet our Father with bitterness, grief, sadness, anger. I think all of those meetings and much more are completely valid. There are endless ways that we can choose to meet our Father. And it might take us a long time to realize that we actually do have some choice about how we not just meet our Father, but how we meet ourselves. For some, I think it seems that there is no other way to meet their Father except maybe one or two ways, depending on what the relationship was, whether it's positive or not. But there are actually endless ways we can meet our Father. Every conceivable human emotion is there in that meeting. Need and self-sufficiency, tenderness and toughness, intimacy and apartness. At the end of the memoir, Nick's father casually remarks as they're driving in his car that he's planted himself all the trees in Boston. And as they drive, his father is pointing out, yep, that one. Yep, that one. Oh yeah, I planted that one. And Nick Flynn writes, he says he has the urge at that moment to open the passenger side door and kick his father out of the moving car. But he doesn't. That's how the book ends. It's a funny way to end the book, but I love it, and I think it's perfect. By then, you clearly know that he loves his father and how his father has influenced his life. Namely, his ambition to be a successful writer, something that he got actually from his father. But his father still gets under his skin, like anyone that we're tied to and anyone that we know very well. And that's still there. It doesn't go away. All those layers are still there. And that's not a bad thing. It's a human thing. As many of you know, Juneteenth was made a national holiday very recently, this year. Many people know about Juneteenth this year, probably more people than any American has ever known more Americans than any number of Americans in all of American history know about Juneteenth this year more than any other year. It's a story you probably know of the Union Army that went to Texas, which was the outskirts of the Confederacy, and enforced the Emancipation Proclamation, which was passed 2 years earlier before they arrived, 2.5 years actually. For 2 years, slaves in Texas were living in a country where slavery was technically illegal, and yet they continued to live as slaves until they were notified that there was a law that was changed and there was proper support to actually enforce that law. From that acknowledgement that they were actually free in that moment. Truthfully free, on paper according to the law 2.5 years earlier, and more importantly, actually free in their lived experience in that moment. And rightfully so, there was a spontaneous celebration to celebrate freedom, to celebrate progress, and to celebrate never giving up hope. Never giving up hope. Celebrations spread up north with migration, even up to the West Coast in California. But interesting enough, during the World Wars, World War I and World War II, Juneteenth celebrations were seen as threats to patriotism, threats to the American way. And it was seen as a very threatening thing to expose the gap between law and lived experience of people. And the celebrations dwindled and nearly died out because of these perceived threats from white citizens in this country. Even during the 1950s and 60s, there were very few Juneteenth celebrations because of the threat of violence from white citizens still adjusting to new legislation during the civil rights movement. And many African Americans in this country saw that a Juneteenth celebration was far too dangerous to do out in public. It's found a kind of resurrection, Juneteenth, in the last few years, and especially this last year. And I've been reflecting on why that might be. Of course, it's happening in the aftermath of worldwide protests for George Floyd and many other black citizens who've been murdered by police. But I think there are other reasons too. I think Juneteenth is a celebration that recognizes that there is a gap often between what is real, what is a lived experience, and the narrative that's on paper and in law. It's a celebration that seeks to close that gap between what is supposed to be true on paper, the truth that we learned maybe in our history class in school, what our preachers told us, what our politicians tell us. It's a way to close the gap between that reality that we've been told of what's true and the actual lived experience of what is actually true. And Juneteenth is about closing that gap. Closing the gap is the main point of this celebration. Righting what has been wrong. I've known people who feel that their father was so good at something that they could never measure up. Maybe their father had a certain skill or a certain way of being that always seemed out of reach for them. It's an admirable quality, but one that can separate instead of bringing us closer to our fathers. Closing the gap is about being willing to go outside of our comfort zone to find out what is real and what could be real. It's finding out who we are by meeting someone with a different lived experience of being alive. It's finding out the ways that we adjust too easily to what we think is real without checking and validating it for ourselves. Father's Day is a day to check in and validate what is real for us. We get a chance to check in with our feelings. We might get to meet our fathers today, or sometime soon, and remind ourselves what they are really like today, on this day. Or if they've passed away, we get to reflect on how they still live through our life, our choices. We get a chance to see our Father's life in ours. We get to reflect on the ways we are in the world and how this has been influenced by our fathers in numerous ways, either in presence or in absence, or a combination of both. If we have children and our fathers ourselves, that becomes more poignant, seeing how our Father has impacted what we hope would be real for our children. There are many great fathers alive on this day. There are many great fathers remembered fondly on this day, and they should be remembered fondly. I think of the time we are living in, and fathers that are able to play an active role in closing the gap between what was supposed to be real but wasn't. I think of the role of fathers in helping children, but really all of us, to have a greater acceptance of ourselves as just enough, and helping us, sometimes challenging us, to be who we could be. I think of fathers who have trans children, children who are questioning their sexuality, questioning their gender openly, questioning their place in the world. I think of the awesome power that fathers have to play during this time in helping a young person to hold and live into these important questions with kindness and courage. It is certainly a great time to be alive. It's a great time to honor our fathers by seeing what they've given us, sometimes in loving presence, sometimes in absence. It's a great time to see what is left undone and what is ours to do in our lifetime, or what is ours to continue, a legacy. Something I really appreciated about my father was that he made people feel important. He did that for me as a kid, and he did that for many people, even strangers, deli clerks, waiters, government employees. He also left a lot undone, which has been actually a great gift to me. Learning how to live what is true for me and doing what I can to finish what is undone has been a way that I've chosen to honor my father. It helps close that gap. I know for many of us, including myself, Our fathers are not here physically with us on this day. But that doesn't mean they are less alive. Sometimes in absence, I found that actually mine is more alive now in certain ways, or ways that I can actually appreciate and see. I hope you're able to enjoy your life on this day. I hope you're able to honor your father with your choices that you make on this day, or at least intend to make. I find it nice to think of one thing I'm grateful for from my father. And I think it's important to say, I love you. If your father is alive and it's safe to do so, tell them you love them. If your father has passed, just say, I love you to yourself. Your father is actually listening because they're part of you. If you're a father, know that you are a father during one of the most important times in human history. If that sounds like a statement for a superhero, I think your understanding is correct. A father is often a superhero for their children, raised to great heights of admiration through love. There is a great yearning for fathers in Youngstown, Ohio, and really across our country. Even if you have children, even if you don't, consider being a father figure, a mentor for someone who is trying to find themselves in this very complex and scary world. Help close the gap between what is and what could be. A father is a model of being a person. For most of us, maybe all of us actually, we get a model that is quite unique and particular. Even if we didn't know our father, our imagination gives us a particular image to either live into or chafe against. But I think eventually, for some of us, we come to the conclusion that it is really important to love our fathers. It is really important. For some, this is a no-brainer and without significant complication. It's natural, beautiful, and wonderful. If that's true for you, celebrate that. It's wonderful to have a father you connect with and who you can show love and appreciation without reservation and without much complication. Celebrate that. For many of us, that love may be a more complex journey, but I would argue it is just as important. Those fathers who are complex teach us to love ourselves as complex. Teach us how to love what we can offer and where we fall short. They teach us how to be, sometimes by teaching us how not to be. That's a great teaching. Remember, there are endless ways you can meet your father on this day. On this day, I'm interested in meeting my father with a mix of curiosity, awe, and gratitude. That's the variation that feels right for me on this day. I don't think there's a wrong answer for how you meet your father, but know that you have a choice. However you choose to meet your father on this day, may it help close the gap. May it help you to close the gap between what is and what could be. Please pray with me. Spirit of love, we are so grateful for everyone who's participated in making this service possible. I thank Marcus Carantang, Melissa Smith, Andy Crabb, Jennifer Ruth Boyd, our musicians, Cynthia and Tom Smotzer, Jeff Krause, and our vocalist, Tim Reardon. Please help us to open ourselves up to joy on this day, joy that comes from integrity, joy that comes from being okay with who we are and with what we're feeling. Please comfort all who are experiencing sickness on this day, are those who are worried about someone in sickness. Please comfort them, hold them, and remind them that they are connected to something that is there, a community like ours, and much, much more. Please help us to be what we could be and close the gap between what is and what could be. All this we pray. Amen.
We extinguish the flame of our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts and share with all the world.
As you depart, please remember the one great fact. You are loved and never truly alone.